Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another top 5 Total War video. This time covering the top 5 most surprising units in a Total War game. So that's to say, units that aren't necessarily the strongest units in these games, but are maybe early or cheap units that perform way above their pay grade. So let's move on now to number 5. Coming in at number 5 is the Levy Spearman unit for Total War Rome 2. So these are the units that any faction can recruit without requiring a barracks. Now, tactically speaking, these guys are trash. In a manually resolved battle, they're pretty much useless. And we've already addressed that the fact that in auto-resolve, they pretty much dominate. If you've got enough of them, you're not going to really take many casualties at all. This battle here, if we had fought it manually, we would have probably taken a lot of casualties and maybe even lost the battle. Auto-resolving it, these guys absolutely wreck them. Now, it's not that makes them so surprising. It's their other, more strategic thing about them that makes them far more useful. In a settlement that you've just captured, under normal circumstances, you're just not really able to recruit new units. Unless you're recruiting these ones. They can be recruited in any region, the moment you capture it, without requiring any barracks, allowing you to use a very effective unit, for its cost, to just keep on conquering. You capture a new settlement, you gain a little bit more money, you recruit some more units. Very surprising unit, and once I discovered this, the game became a hell of a lot easier. Anyway, with that, let's move on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 are the Mercenary Crossbow units in Medieval 2. Now, these are units that are readily available right at the start. They're a mercenary unit. They're a little bit on the expensive side, but why are they so surprising? Because of their ability to absolutely wreck the most powerful unit that you will face in the early game, which is to say the General's Bodyguard. These guys here, if they can get a good shot in on the General's Bodyguard, will absolutely wreck them. They're also the only units at the beginning of the game that you can recruit that can outrange every other form of archer. So if you get these units, you'll be able to dominate the skirmish, which is very important in the medieval period. And that's why these guys are getting the number 4 slot. Okay, so let's move on now to the number 3 slot. Coming in at number 3 are the Peasant Bowmen for Total War Warhammer 2, exclusive to Bretonnia. Now, these are not good archers, okay? They're actually some of the worst archers in the game. So why are they so surprising? Well, because they are dirt cheap, but they actually perform really well for their cost value. Bretonnia is probably one of the weakest factions in this game. They've got incredibly weak infantry, and their cavalry is a little bit on the expensive side, and not even the best in the game, in my opinion. However, their archers, for their cost, really make up for that lack of quality units that Bretonnia have. So, any Bretonnian army that doesn't field at least 6 or 7 archers is really doing themselves a disservice, because archers in Total War Warhammer are able to defeat pretty much any unit in the game, with the exception of hero units, small hero units, just because they're a little bit inaccurate against that. But as you can see there, they absolutely wrecked those Minotaurs, which is why these guys are getting the number 3 slot, turning a faction that would otherwise be completely useless into just being semi-useless. Anyway, let's now move on to the number 2 slot. Coming in at number 2 is a unit that's very surprising. In Napoleon Total War for the Ottoman Empire, for multiplayer and custom battles, because they're not available in the Grand Campaign, a unit that they have, which isn't the best unit in the game, but it's very surprising, is this Samat Janissaries. These guys here, whilst they don't have guns, destroy everything in melee, as long as they're not exhausted. So all you have to do is walk to your enemies, and once you get into firing range, get into melee. And then these units here absolutely destroy. Now, I've already fought this battle a bunch of times, and I've won this every single time, with these guys here getting absurd numbers of kills. Like I said, they're not the best units in the game, but for the 500 that they cost, they're significantly cheaper than line infantry, and absolutely wreck line infantry in melee. Of course, that's even assuming that the line infantry get a few shots off as well. Like I said, these guys here absolutely destroy in melee, which is, like I said, very surprising that a melee unit would dominate in an otherwise gunpowder focused game, and that's why they're getting the number 2 slot. Anyway, let's move on now to the number 1 slot for the most surprising unit in a Total War game. Coming in at number 1 is the Yari Ashigaru unit for Total War Shogun 2. So this is, again, another unit that is super basic. You don't need a barrack in order to recruit them. Available to all factions, super cheap, stats-wise, pretty trashy. So why are they so surprising? It all comes down to their special ability, Yari Wall. These units can take on their higher tier units, the Yari Samurai, whilst they're in Spear Wall, which we're about to see right here. So we've got a situation where the Yari Samurai charging in there, into a Spear Wall, and the Yari Ashigaru, in terms of their value, will way outperform the Yari Samurai. It's a big surprise for anyone that, first time playing Total War Shogun 2. You can see these guys not really taking that many casualties, and they've already inflicted more casualties than lost up against superior units, which is why these guys here are getting the #1 slot. Like I said, an incredibly powerful unit that is still viable even in the late campaign. The only problem with them is, of course, their morale, which if you've got a good enough general, you can keep them in line. Anyway, so that's my top 5 pick. This is a bit of a difficult one because it's hard to come up with, like, surprising units as opposed to, strongest units or anything like that. But anyway, let me know what you think about my list, and let me know what top 5 video you want me to do next. Until then, I'll see you next time, fuckers.